We're good to go. We're good to go. We're good to go.
Your lighting is. I just need to go and fix the lighting.
Don't complete my lighting. My lighting.
We are not streaming on YouTube. And ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what we're talking about. What we've been talking about for the past few weeks. You have a lighting problem. Let me leave my desk and go fix your lighting. Welcome to He Said, She Said Part 2.
Oh my goodness. Really?
The past few weeks have been quite a journey for all of us. This will make it episode 9. And we just started out as friends, Christians, and good old-fashioned human beings, having a chat amongst ourselves about anything and everything. And we felt that unconsciously these were discussions, but maybe people were not having in this way. And we said, let's just click on stream. And if anybody's interested, they can watch it and they can always get back to it later. And I find it interesting because as we've grown in these conversations, we are learning. I think each and every one of us is learning something in one way or the other, and it's been quite inspiring. And then a couple of weeks ago, a bomb was kind of dropped by our regular bombers in the house who are trying to be undercover. I shall mention no names. Hi, Toy. And these are people who, where is the other bomber? Where are the modes today? And they just generally go around Pearl Harboring everywhere.
Go on.
And
shut the door.
One of them mentioned how, guys just don't talk. And it got us into this whole tangent of discussing the male species, as it were. And we felt that the ladies should be invited to give their take. And it was really enlightening. I was pleasantly surprised. They kept all their bows and arrows at home, and we were all very civil with one another until last episode where Yinka dropped this hit and run thing, and he said, can we talk about submission? The dreaded S in relationships, which is often misunderstood, I suspect. And we felt that would be a good thing because people talk about that a lot. And I'm not just talking about in marriages. At some point in time, we're a bit worried that this seemed to be a marriage counseling session. We're talking about how we relate to each other. And I think certain things like submission have been lost in translation somewhere or the other. But is that true? Or are we dealing with egos and stubbornnesses and we just don't want to admit it? Well, it seems we have a panel of very free thinkers who speak freely, speak their mind, and that's great. That's exactly what we want. Bayo is your regular chef, and Toyin has been dishing out the dishes in the last few weeks too. And they've just been enjoying themselves, Richard. I mean, I'm concerned at how much they've been enjoying themselves. You just get this feeling that they've been waiting for this opportunity.
You're worried you may not be able to get rid of us, right?
Yeah, I've been asking Bayo, how do we do this? Do we give them another link? And then they... But so that's where we are. Yinka dropped it. He'll be joining us shortly. I think I saw a message from him. And the question, and that's where we're taking it up from. So that's it. Did I do a good job as a stand-in chef? I did. Thank you very much. So over to the team.
All right. So who's going to kick it off?
I don't feel I can go first because I watched some of the video from
Good.
last week. Not all of it, but it was very lively, shall we say. It seemed to have a lot more passion in it than some of the previous episodes. So, but I think the thing that watching it maybe from a distance, I think the thing that I was, thinking a lot about when you guys were all talking about the differences or not between men and women, and then I guess the issue of submission is just that all of this relates to our relationship with God. So all human relations are kind of within the context of what God's ultimate wish is for us, to have a relationship with Him. And I just find it really interesting that we are in a sense called to submit to God, and yet we have a God who washes His disciples' feet. So there's a kind of, from the very sort of outset, the sort of modeling that God does of what relationships should be like, it's kind of counterintuitive.
I like that.
Thanks, Richard. Do you have a follow-on on that to that, Balaji?
Yeah, I really like that because so when we had friends, we saw some friends this week, didn't we? And Andy and Hazel were here actually for a meal, and we talked about the fact that it's a mutual thing, and you come from a position of strength. For both of you, it doesn't mean that one person is weaker than the other. Submission doesn't mean that one person is weaker than the other. Submission means that you're willing to open up your hearts to each other and open up your, if you like, missions or your individual aspirations, hopes, goals, dreams, objectives to each other. And again, like I said, also it's like Shags was saying at the beginning, that it's not just a question of a marriage relationship. It's also what you find, like having two co-founders in the business, I realized that, if it was always about what one person wanted, it never really worked. It was better for us to all find a way to work together in harmony. And that didn't mean having to concede authority or strength to another person. It wasn't, in fact, it was far from it. It was quite the opposite. So I think for me, that's, I think it's the same thing with Jesus, and that image of him washing our feet, really makes me feel that that's exactly what I think about submission. It's usually actually the stronger party, in quotes, the stronger party that has to demonstrate submission, even more than the so-called weaker party in that relationship, or be it business or whatever. So that's my thought. Those are my thoughts on what Richard just said.
I like that. There's something there as to submission, and I'm just going to throw. I'm going to use some player words, and I'm going to throw this out to everyone. And this is going to be like a rapid fire succession kind of thing. So submission is basically two words. Yeah. Bringing under your mission. And there's something that we have always said together on the table. And as a table, that is on the topic or the issue of identity. So if we do not know our identity, how are we able to know our missions? So if you don't know your mission, what are you going to be able to submit? So where does that tie in, everyone? Let's see, who's going to be the first? Who's going to be the first for me? Who? Toyin, you've been quiet all week. You want to take this on?
All week. Interesting. Okay, so actually, I think something that Balaji said, the word who is stronger, I want to pick up on that to start with, because she was saying basically that it's really about recognizing your strengths and then almost like laying it down in a sense. So I know that I'm strong in a particular area, and I may, sometimes I'm misguided in my strengths because I've never actually allowed myself to lay what I call my strength down enough for to figure out what the other party brings to the relationship. So, but I just going on to answer to your question, not to answer it necessarily, but you're so right about the mission thing, because we talked last week about, egos and self, where I am in that relationship and knowing where I am going on a journey. And wherever we are in life, in any relationship at all, we're always on a journey. So if we, the scripture that came to my mind was submit yourself to God. Okay, so if we're under submission to God, then all the relationships that we walk in, we begin to understand that, one, I know, okay, I may be bringing this particular strength to this relationship, but we're going somewhere together in God. So if I'm in a marriage, then what is how do I submit to what God wants in that relationship? If I'm in a relationship with a colleague or my siblings or my family, for example, and this just popped into my head, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but sometimes you have a situation that arises in the family and you are thrust into something and you have to sit there and listen to all kinds of emotions and things like that going on. And in your heart, you're thinking, okay, what do we want as a family in this? We want peace. So how do we get to peace? And if I think like that, then it means I don't throw my own emotions into the fray. I don't pick on things that have happened in the past and I just think, right, you are doing this thing again. Today I'm going to let you know. None of that. Because I am submitted in my mind and in my way of thinking to what do we want here? What has God said about my family? You know, what has God said about my mission? And he says, you know, this thing about always being the peacemaker. Always being the peacemaker. So if I'm thinking with the head of the peacemaker, and you know, you can think about that, then I'm not the one who's going to be dropping bombs. Shegun, I don't drop bombs, just saying, just saying, you know, but you're on mute.
Yeah, I was going to say you've been dropping them because look, I have a very simple question. Why would the Bible say, and you know, we know it says it in Ephesians 5, wives submit to your husband. I mean, I like all this gist. It sounds nice and cute and, you know, homely, but why would it specify wives submit to your husbands? I'm not trying to stir up anything. I'm asking a very simple question.
Okay.
Just get it.
All right. So for me, I believe
Yeah.
that I as a wife, and I have been a wife, as Yinka said last week, for a few minutes. So I realized that there's a greatness in when God says, wife, submit to your own husband, because it basically puts me under submission to God. And what ends up happening with me is, if God has said, this is my covering, this is my head, and his head is God, then effectively, it means that as long as I am under him, I have direct access to God. And I'm not saying this in any kind of spiritual jargon, but it also means that constantly I am in a position to bring our relationship to God and the things that happen in our relationship directly to God, because God is the head. I'm submitted to my husband, but God is our head. And that works in my marriage all the time. When I apply it.
I was about to say, because I'm trying to see it in scenarios. We've all been in scenarios. We've all related with people in scenarios. Balaji talked about, you know, bringing that strength under. I get that, and I completely concur. But in a real scenario where there is a challenge and a solution is required, and you think you're right, and this person, what does that mean in practical terms to lay down your strength? Are you saying you're not going to propose what you think should be the solution or the way out? Are you saying whatever he says goes? Because we can have all these definitions. I just want to know how that practically plays out.
Okay,
I'm going to allow somebody else to speak now.
Okay, I'm going to, I think we're going to build on that. And for us to build on that, at least we need to have a point of reference or some context. And we're going to ask for, who has not spoken? MM. And then Soluchi, you're going to answer Shegun's question. So MM, definition of submission.
I just asked the question, I guess.
Oh, did you? Okay, well.
I said it there. I said, can someone, share a definition? I think I like what both people had said. I don't have a dictionary definition of it, but I think it's really, if I think about it, it's understanding yourself enough to understand your actual purpose, and then to submit, like to be, what's the word? I think Toyin was saying something about being under to be able to achieve a mission. Okay, so I don't know why submission has got such a bad rap. It's been treated as such a bad word, and it's a lovely thing. I see it in the Bible here, and it says, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church, and he's the savior of the body. I don't know how many of us saw this tweet that went viral with the one that the Geo, he posted about his wife for her birthday. Anyway, he posted this tweet about his wife and said, "Oh, she's so lovely. It's his birth. I mean, it was, I think, their 50-something wedding anniversary or her birthday or something." And he says, "Oh, she leaves everything and focuses on me. She cooks my meals and serves me every single day." So everybody was backlash, like, what do you mean? Is she a slave and all that and stuff? And it really got a lot of them. It's on Twitter. It's gone viral for like the past 2 weeks. Okay, so he put a very long testimonial about how wonderful his wife is. She has given up so much just for him. She has, done this. And I mean, the whole part, he talked about how she calls him, my Lord, and all those, I mean, a lot of stuff that I mean,
And
they,
the feminist gang.
I mean, so people went crazy, like, what is that? Is she your slave? Is she your cleaner? Is she your this and that? And somewhere along the line, I actually thought it was just, I mean, I don't have any issues with submission. I thought it was a beautiful thing because everyone was going crazy. Like, some people actually really cussed him out, So some people were really disrespectful. So they really went really well. How dare he talk to a woman? Does he think that women are for this and that, So looking at it in the Bible, I think submission is, again, for wives, it's almost like your defense. It's a simple thing. I mean, the Lord is saying it. We're not saying you're crawling on the floor and whatever the man says, you're like, yes, sir, yes, sir. In practicality, in marriage, if I look at it in marriage, I like what Boladio spoke about relationships in the office or whatever it is. You know yourself. You're beginning to know yourself more and more. You know your attitude. You know your reactions. You know your behavior, and then all you know is that you're on a mission to succeed. You're on a mission to achieve God's purpose and calling. So you should know who has the, I don't know, skills in different things. There are many things. Sometimes, again, looking at marriage, my husband may say some things and I'm like, wow. In my head, I'm thinking, wow. Like, I'm thinking in my head, like, Lord, is your son okay? Did you hear what this man just said to me, or something, okay? And I'm thinking about that, but I am your wife. I have no problem with, I'm a very independent woman, but I have no problem with submission because it's a defense. It's a defense for us to be able to walk in this path. Okay, so he has maybe some ideas or some suggestions. I'm not going to bark at you and say, are you insane? There's also the scripture that says, let nothing be done through selfish ambition and conceit. I think Philippians 2 or so, 10 or the other. Look at everyone, esteem everyone as better than yourselves. There's a scripture like that says so. So it applies in marriage. It applies in relationships. Okay, so I don't go into things feeling, listen, I've got the works, I know all this, I do all that. There's mutual respect. I think submission is about mutual respect, understanding yourself, understanding your strengths, understanding where you can come in, knowing when to step back, knowing when to be like, I shouldn't just talk about this right now, because unless it might blow up, okay, or it might turn into something else. Your submission is knowing if I use the word knowing your place, it's going to look as if you're down here. I don't see myself as that, but I know that there's a time for everything. There's a way to say something. There's a way to approach it. There's a way that something can be said that turns everything upside down and looks, it looks disrespectful. So I think one key thing about submission is that respect. Even the Bible speaks about respect. The Lord, when he says, I respected the offering of this person, there's something about respect. So I think we're not saying, dobale or whatever it is, or curtsy in the morning to, I have a friend who says she kneels down in the morning to give her husband breakfast. I'm like, wow, I mean, I admire her. I look at it, I'm like, wow, because I mean, they're like the same age, so I'm like, interesting. I even told my husband one time, I said, wow, maybe in our 25th, when we're my 25 years, I will see if my knees can bend down like that and I'll try and start doing that. But I mean, it's a thing we smile, we laugh about, but I'm not going to start doing that. That's not but it works for them. So I mean, it works for them. But
you know what? I think you're talking about a scenario where it's all, how do you submit to an unreasonable person, for instance? If you've got a mad hatter at home, or a husband, or, how do you submit to that kind of person?
Again, the scripture also has that is not telling you, the man also has his own part to play. So men, you're supposed to love your wife as Christ loved the church. And it's not really about the person's attitude. You're determined, you're loving this person, he's your husband. So again, you would find the approach that works. So whether it means you stepping back, sometimes step back and pray, and you come back and approach the same thing. But you must, again, know yourself and begin to understand this person better. Understand how they respond, their love language. People are generally, there's one book that I love, it's actually a Christian book too. It says, everybody is normal until you get to know them. So I always say everyone has a bit of madness in them. We all have. I mean, you may think the person is unreasonable. He may think you're unreasonable too. So there is an approach, and you keep learning. Yeah, it's true. So maybe your calmness may also seem unreasonable to another person too. So I think everyone must tend to understand themselves more, know when to step back. I've also worked with some people that people thought were impossible to work with, but worked perfectly well. So I take out time to really try and understand people, and then I know I learned the right approach, or when to keep quiet, or whatever it is that works. Yeah. So I don't think it's a sucky uppy thing. You're not turning into a suck up like, yes sir and yes ma, whatever it is. But understanding yourself enough and being aware of yourself enough that you know where your strengths are and how to play your strengths. I think that's where how I would define it somehow or the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Soluchi, Shegun asked some question. Yeah.
I've been
See, I may have been the voice piece, but it was not necessarily my question. I was just trying to make all possible thoughts.
Yeah.
I've been quiet deliberately. I've just been hoping that the conversation would go smoothly, freely, without me stirring up anything, but listening to all of us, I'm like applauding such a beautiful scenario. And I wish it were like this in real life. In real life.
Now she gets where I'm going to.
Yes, I wish this was like all smooth and dandy, stronger person. Let's come. Life, we won't have problems. But the one point for me is submit. The definition of the word submission is unfortunately highly subjective to the person that is receiving that definition. To us here, we might feel that same way. We might feel like that with our spouses. But for some other person, submission is that my word is law. And my word is law. That is the meaning of submission to that person. There are people who are in relationships where they do not get to have an opinion. You even having an opinion is deemed to be disrespectful.
Yeah.
So I want to turn it back to what Tony said. Tony talked about, submitting to her husband because you are lucky that you made that choice. Remember, it's not God that chose for you. God stopped choosing since Adam accused him. Adam said, the wife you gave me. God said, no more. Choose your own wife and your own husband. I'm not choosing for anybody again, So it starts from, first of all, the choice you make in who to submit to. The choice you make in who you are going to submit to. You have to, for me, submission comes from a position of trust. I have to trust your leadership. I have to trust that you are making the best and the right decisions for me. And I have to trust that you understand the concept of leadership. So whatever it is that you say we're doing in the family that you bring out as the vision, I trust it because I have seen you make better decisions in other areas. So I can trust it. For me, if I'm submitting to someone, for me, it's cruise control. It's not easy being the head. It's not easy being the one to steer that ship. Where people have a problem with submission is who you're submitting to. And the person's understanding of what submission means. Because you can be submitting and agreeing to things and deferring to the person in love, but that's not the person's understanding of submission. As a wife, you agreed to the school where the kids will go. You may have preferred another school, but you agreed. But you didn't serve him kneeling down. At all, no, you're not submitted. You have agreed to where you live. You prefer to live in a certain area, but he says, you've agreed to that. But no, you didn't take out his plate. You are not submitted. It depends on who is defining.
Can I say a couple of things that we may not be able to explore in this time? Because the more I hear from everyone, the more I realize that we give ourselves a terrible deadline with this 40-minute thing, for topics that men and women have been talking about for forever. But I just want to bring out three things, and I honestly can't remember who said it. Everybody's just stirring some thoughts in me. When is it placating and when is it submission? When are you placating and when are you submitting? That's one. Two, the role of tradition, culture in the place of submission. Because one thing I think we tend to forget is that we were brought up in different environments, sometimes the same environment but different parents. And they raise us to have definitions unconsciously of respect and submission and trust and all these words. And sometimes society also presents a definition. And a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about identity and how it relates to the race challenges. And we realized that we are unconsciously also a product of our society. And could that be the same in this respect when it comes to submission? And the final thing I thought about was this, and this may seem a bit controversial. Again, I don't intend to be, so don't send me any chat, so it's not me. Does the Bible present a sort of hierarchy in relationship, which is, whether it's consciously doing that in defining the role of the woman and the man? Is there, because the question was, why say that to the woman? Why not say submit one to another? Unless, like you said, there is a definition of leadership going on here that we're not quite seeing. Or there is a definition of where you have to consciously say, I submit. And like I said, these are deeper issues that we may not have the time to explore here. But I think the worldview these days, and I hope I'm not going on another tangent, is this of, you hear this equality thing a lot, which I understand where it comes from, and I treat everyone with the same respect, regardless of gender, creed, color, whatever. But is there a hierarchy here that we're kind of ignoring? Is there a role? Is there a reason? And I'm just throwing that out there because in conversations like this, these are the conversations I will have with Sam, or I'll have with Richard or Toye. We are just talking about this, but we shouldn't be afraid of where the conversation goes. And neither should we necessarily, I want to hold on to my view, because then how do we learn from each other?
Can I just say something to this? And this is my personal opinion, and like you said, we have to feel free to give out our opinions, and that's why we're here, because we're different. I would like to take what you're referring to, what the Bible says, as a definition of roles when it comes to relationships, because I see it as a team. Christ, the husband, and the wife. That's a team. Christ, the husband and wife. In a team, there has to be roles. I can't imagine that in a team, like as we are here, there is no sort of leadership. My understanding here is that Samuel is the chef. And all the, two chefs or whatever you want to call, right?
So we're all eaters, we just come to eat.
Yes, exactly. So I'm imagining that is a ship, rightly called relationship. There has to be someone steering it. If everybody puts their hands to the wheels, that ship is going nowhere. Because you have people who have different opinions, different backgrounds, different perspectives. So imagine steering a ship with those kind of different. So my understanding is that has to do with roles. And that's why the Bible says, submit to your own husband, not to the man on the street, because that is a ship. Christ is the head, the man provides the leadership, and the woman provides the support. Like I said, if we understand how crucial that head is, we would not, the reason we are ever having any conversations on submission is because there's something wrong with the leadership role. I believe that is why we have these submission conversations. Because there's something wrong with the leadership roles. There are many women who are playing the leadership roles. They are many, by circumstance or by whatever, many women are playing the leadership roles. And these conversations are coming, and they are now distorted views about equality. What I'm talking about equality, I'm not talking about wife, not cook. Hello, I don't even have the time to do the cooking. I'll get chef to do the cooking. I'm not about that. I'm talking about that in my workspace, you pay me what you are paying my male counterpart. And that if I walk into a restaurant, the same respect you accord my male counterpart, you accord me. And that I'm driving on the road, I don't want to hear, now woman, they drive safe. I have bigger issues. And for other countries, they have bigger issues, like voting, like driving. Let's not make it about the trigger issue. So, in that relationship space, there has to be definition of roles so that there will be a direction. Trust me, if that submitting to Christ, you guys have a harder task. To die for me, you have a harder task.
Okay.
So if that was there, it's easy for me to, why is it easy for you to submit to Christ? Is it because you feel he's wielding some power to knock your head when you're not doing right? It's because you trust his leadership.
Mm.
Nice one.
Okay. All right. Oof. There's so much that Segun has said and a lot that you have said, Soluchi. And there is something there that we throw out a great deal. And it's when is it placating and when is it submission? And I asked the question, we saw a couple of friends this week, and I said, what are the components that make up submission, that make it a healthy submission? What are the components that make it a healthy submission? Because if one is out, then it's no longer submission. Because submission is, I use this image in my head. A threefold cord is not easily broken. And when you look at a cord, they are so interwoven that you can't say this is the strongest cord or this is the strongest piece. They're interwoven. And Segun asked that question. When is it placating and when is it submission? What are the things that make it submission? So Lucia has put one out there, trust. But what else again? You know, what else would make it submission? If I don't trust you, would I submit to you? If I don't love you, would I submit? If I don't have any honor?
And if I say, well, let me not just argue. That's
yes.
not
Yes.
You have not submitted anything.
Richard, I can see that you've been. Go on, Richard. You've been. Just go for it.
I guess I'm just reacting a bit on whether how far our submission is conditional when compared to Christ. So just his submission of his giving up of his power when he came flesh, all the things he could have done but chose not to do with people who were quite unreasonable. So it's not that I intuitively, I totally agree. It's a two-way thing in any relationship, whether it's in a marriage or in friendships or in workplaces, and it takes two to tango to have good relationships. And if one's unreasonable, then you could withdraw what you do. But then if we just ask ourselves what Jesus did, in the Last Supper, he knew Judas was going to betray him, and yet he still invited him to the communion table. That's quite shocking, I think, that he was still willing to do that. And so there is a challenge. And if you look in some of the later letters, you get this picking up this particular issue around slavery at the time, and that slaves should submit to their masters, Paul is advising. And then there's the story of Onesimus. We don't have the full story, but you see that he kind of leaves his master, and Paul then is saying that there's something that's going on there. He chose at some point not to submit to his master, but for a greater good. So there are clearly situations where you do have to stop and say, I need to do something. There's a higher calling for me to do something. But I just find that when you look at Jesus, it's still very challenging. Because I'm glad you mentioned earlier the Philippians 2. And of course that bit there about submitting, not looking after your own interests. I mean, it goes on there, doesn't it, to talk about Jesus just putting putting to death, in a sense, all himself. And there is that challenge, I think, for all of us still. Kind of give up our ego and our right to win the argument or have our say, and I haven't figured it out, but I still find it very, very challenging.
But what sorry, can I just say something to that? Then I just feel like, to an extent, submission can sort of drive you off a cliff sometimes, because if you've sort of from what you've said, Richard, about giving up on arguments occasionally, and Soluchi, what you said about trust, if you've submitted and if you've given up on arguments sometimes, even when you think that in some ways this might be going in a direction that you do not like, what, you know, I just wonder, you know, what's the solution to that? What is the, how can you still submit in where there is disagreement, you know, where there is, and very strong disagreement, and, you know, the leader in the situation is convinced of their current direction and their current scope of goals, if you like, and you're just there sort of submitting and going along with it because you trust the leader. In some cases that trust is genuine, you know, you trust the leader, but you're going and it drives you off a cliff, you know. For me, that's where I struggle, that if especially in the workplace environment, you know, or, you know, in friendships even, where, you know, you're talking about submitting one to another, and you know that you don't particularly like this direction that things are going, you know, how do you step back? How do you?
I had a light bulb moment when Richard was talking, and I'm going to just read what I wrote down. And I wrote, if I hear you, Richard, submission doesn't have to be reciprocal or reciprocated.
Mm.
Jesus didn't expect the people he was submitting to do the same for him, or to do it in the same way. He didn't expect the disciples to suddenly start washing his feet. Instead, rather go wash others. And if you go into a relationship of any sort with the mindset that as I do to you, I want you to do to me, I realize how very collected a person who submits must be. That person must be very knowing to be able to say, I will submit regardless of if it's reciprocated. You know, there must be a connection to a higher understanding than just some mere, I am letting my debate or viewpoint, you know, pass under. Then the second thing I wrote was, submission isn't for the person in immediate authority that you can see, or the leader. Submission is understanding that God put the person there. And so you are constantly submitting to God through that person. Jesus didn't think Pontius Pilate was greater than him, but he was submitting to the purpose. And it showed a great honor to God that he would submit. So even when it seems unreasonable, this goes beyond winning an argument. And I dare say, even peace in the house. There is something unnatural about submission. If you really look at it, it is really extremely powerful. And those were the two things I wrote. It takes a great deal of depth to truly submit.
And I just want to add, I don't think we answered Bolaji. I don't know, Bolaji, did we answer your question? Okay, so I want to add to that question with a scenario, because I think that perhaps we're like mixing two things. I think in a marriage relationship, it's different. And when it comes to our other relationships, which we approach from a Christian point of view, right? So I want to add Bolaji's question with a scenario. I am working in my office and I am due for promotion, but I was asked to get, not me, just a scenario. I'm asked to, for me to get that promotion, I am asked to give, let's say, 500,000. So, person making the decision, and I bring it home to my husband, and I say to my husband, this is what I'm being asked to do, and I don't want to do it, and I don't agree with it. My husband insists that we do it, that it is going to raise my income, which will raise the income of the family, and to give me the 500,000 to do, to give as a bribe. What should I do? How should I submit in this case?
Like, wow.
Are you asking the question, or you? Because I was.
And I have to bring this scenario because, and there are many.
Yeah, there are many. Look, there are 101 scenarios. Like I said, remember I said at the beginning. Remember I said at the beginning that we need to be practical about these things, because people watching and listening are like, oh, I get that. And they're learning about submission as in definition and their relationship with God, but they're struggling with how to apply it in their situation. So I'm glad you raised that. But I think what we're trying to do is establish something here that if you say you're submitting, there is a degree of understanding and maturity that has to be there. And if, like Bolaji, I think said it at the beginning, or was it even you, Soluchi, that said, really having that understanding of who you married. And I'm really trying to avoid going there, but a lot of people, their marriage foundation is really, really questionable when you talk to them. You know, it was really just based on impressing one another and then playing it by ear. And they're learning all the stuff they need to learn as they go along. And to some extent, you can't just take submission in isolation. You need to pray for the wisdom of your husband. Yeah. Pray for the wisdom of your wife. And so they can't be done in isolation. If you are praying for your husband in this scenario to walk in wisdom and you submit to his leadership, and you submit to his leadership, but you don't expect to submit when you're not praying about wisdom or you're not and all these things. I don't know if that makes any sense.
In this situation, I've prayed for his wisdom. I pray every day. I fast. I do.
Yeah. Okay. So let me say something here, because if we're saying we submit to God, it's one of two things. You have to make a choice. You either decide that, okay, Lord, I have submitted to you. I'm submitting to this guy through you, and he has said this is what we're doing, and I'm going to do it under submission. You fix it. So this is not, you're not doing it because you choose to do it, but you're doing it under submission, but you are in God with this. Or you say, God, I'm not going to do this because this one is not according to what you will. And I will take the consequences because I am in agreement with you, not with him. But either way, we're submitted to God. So you make a choice. I'm either going to do it in submission, but God, you see this, you have to fix it. Or I am not going to do it in submission to you. God, you see this, you have to fix it. And you're prepared to take the consequences.
So, Tony, I'm prepared to take the consequences, to be caught, giving bribe on camera. And I'm taking.
So what I'm saying is, it goes back to your relationship with God. Because when you bring this matter home to your husband, and your husband says something, you have to go back to God. And so if you choose, and if you go to God and you say, God, okay, I'm not going to do this because of all these things that Solitary has just said. I'm not prepared to be taken to prison. Then you have to be prepared to live in that hot house, still under God. And God is faithful. And you have to remember also that just because I lose, and part of the discussion that turns into an argument is when I'm trying to make my point and you're not hearing my point. So let me make it in a different way. And you're still not hearing it. So let me make it. But actually, if you say, okay, let me just go away and pray about it some more. When that thing becomes a heated argument, and you do go and pray about it, and you don't go and say, God, see this man, the 3 minutes over, bless God. But you go to God in a constructive way that, Lord, this husband of mine, we need to be on this journey together with you. And you bring it back, you keep bringing it back until God, you will see when God has done the work. And if you lose the job in the process of trying to reach this decision, you're still on the journey with God, but you are walking with God. Okay, I'm going to keep quiet because we're well over.
No, I really agree with that. And, sort of taking it to my marriage, I think that, I have a husband I can trust and I look up to. So I suppose it's an ideal scenario here where it's very easy to submit to Samuel, But I think also there is an element there where, because of going back to your individual, going back to yourself, there's an element there where, because I have that relationship with God, I can cheat by talking to God about it first before I take it to Samuel. And the chances are, God would have conditioned his heart already. Do you know what I mean?
Assuming that you are married to a man whose heart is conditioned to God.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about my scenario.
Does not mean going to church, speaking in tongues does not mean that your heart is yielded to God. We are assuming condition, because there are women who have been praying, kabashing, their husband, they kabash, but heart. God that knows that heart. The heart is not yielded to God. It's just that we don't have the time.
I don't think we have enough time to really deal with this. And And yeah, we do have a question that came from someone on YouTube, which is, what is the breaking point? And it's interesting that everyone has a different breaking point. But what I would say is, what is your breaking point? Where do you draw the line? And especially with us being Christians, I cannot in any way come to a compromise with God because I am trying to please who I am either in a relationship with.
Mhm.
That's the first point. You know, there's something that, and I think one of the answers to all of everything we've said is, look at Joseph. We've talked about Jesus. Okay, we think, well, yes, Jesus. Yeah, you're talking about Jesus way up there, far away. But look at Joseph. Joseph was submitted to Potiphar. Potiphar had a wife, Mrs. Potiphar. So meaning Joseph was indirectly submitted to Mrs. Potiphar. And she said, this is the decision, young man. I like you. I see you. You're good. So let's, hanky panky. Not first time, not second time. It was for a while. But Joseph kept saying one thing: I cannot do this. To who? God.
God, yeah.
So irrespective, is
Mhm.
God first. God first. But the thing is, that decision cost Joseph. It's not only did it cost him, brother man was bruised. He was beaten, because I'm sure everybody took out their aggression on him. Well, you think you are coming in here and showing us up? Took it out on him, beat him up and all. And after that, he was cast into prison. Not for a day, not for a night.
Years.
For years. And there's something about being a Christian. It doesn't mean that our walk and our journey is always going to be beautiful. There is beauty in the brokenness, but it doesn't mean that walk on its own is a walk through the park and we're seeing the flowers and the birds and the bees. There are going to be places where we will go into. Well,
Sorry,
we are
just
over time now.
just one
Are you
second.
taking Yinka's place?
The question back next week. Or are we moving on?
No, we have to continue. We have to continue.
Because we're well over time. I need to go and submit to my husband.
Can we remember something in the Garden of Eden? Adam, Eve, the serpent. Everybody was held responsible for their actions.
Yes.
Adam said, the woman you gave me. God said no. Eve said, the serpent you created. God said no. You take your own, take your own, take your own. We're all responsible and we'll answer to God.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Definitely.
Guys, I want to say a big thank you. There was a question that Richard asked about how we help partners and friends submit to God better. Valid question. I honestly just sometimes think we should have a special, like an all-night weekend retreat or something. I really do enjoy the conversation. And I enjoy the various angles and thoughts. And obviously, we're not the only people out there that do so. And it's good, it's healthy. And I believe God uses such platforms like this to help instruct us. And hopefully someone going through a bit of a bad patch out there will hear this and have some kind of guidance. That's really my prayer anyway. Because when you're in it, it's not pleasant, and it can be very confusing. So please do send the link out to friends. You never know what people are going through. They don't wear it on their foreheads anymore.
Yeah.
But it could be useful. And thank you, all of you guys. We'll see you next week by God's grace. I really like this panel. I really do. Well done, guys, and have a great weekend ahead and a lovely week. Thank you, Toyin. Thank you, Sam. Balaji.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. God bless you.
Next one.
Bless you.
Bye.